A very good evening and thank you for staying with us on Republic. In a very first response from the Prime Minister literally has hit out at Rahul Gandhi. For the tons of times that Congress leader Rahul has spoken on foreign soil, he's belittled the country and he has belittled our democracy. And the Prime Minister says this is an insult for 130 crore Indians. We get you highlights of that big story and much more. But first up, the headlines. The Prime Minister's direct attack on Rahul Gandhi calls comments attacking democracy an insult to all the people of the country. The centre is opposing the plea for the same-sex marriage, citing quote-unquote Indian family unit concept before the top court. Days after going missing, the Pulwama widow detained at their residence, Manju Jat, now is alleging that she was beaten up by the police in detention. Dance at the Delhi Bar Association event has gone viral. The legal fraternity has condemned the Holy Milan dance at the Patiala House Court complex. Vande Bharat is targeted for the fifth time, the third time in West Bengal. A probe now has been ordered into the attack. And there are concerns over rising seasonal flu. This is the H3N2 virus. 2 deaths have been reported in the country, about 400 cases that have been lodged. There are concerns now being raised on what should be the preventive measures in place. And first up, let's put our focus on one significant story that has developed in the day. The centre now has opposed the same-sex marriages in the Supreme Court. The centre earlier has filed an affidavit. It has cited legitimate state interest. It has also said that Western decisions cannot be imported. In the same affidavit that has been accessed by Republic, the centre also says that considerations of societal morality are relevant, and this is the reason why it believes that same-sex marriages cannot be allowed in the country. Now, clearly, this is a story that has drawn certain sharp reactions that have come in from all quarters, and we'll have to see what the Supreme Court actually opines on the entire issue. But let's understand the merits, the pros and cons of that argument that has been made by the centre. We have Swapnil Kothari joining us, and we'll also have Ashok Kavi, who's also a journalist and an LGBTQ rights activist, with us on the broadcast in just a bit. First up, Swapnil, I want to understand from you, at a point where, this is a progressive country, this is a progressing democracy, to be able to say that we will not allow for same-sex marriages, citing Indian culture, how valid is that argument? How could the Supreme Court be looking at that argument that has been made by the centre?
Well, at best, I think the Supreme Court is just going to empathize with that argument. But eventually what succeeds at the Supreme Court or at any judicial level is valid legal arguments. In my opinion, if you do not allow same-sex marriages, it is violative of Article 14 of the Constitution. Article 19 obviously allows you the freedom of association with anybody that you want to associate with, especially since 2018 when the law of homosexuality was decriminalized. That is Section 377 of the IPC was read down to allow same-sex. Then why not go a step further? That will be the point which will be made by the Supreme Court. I do not think that this kind of an affidavit will hold any legal validity in the eyes of the Supreme Court, especially when a 3-judge bench is sitting over it, and especially when it's led by the Chief Justice of India, Mr. Dhananjay Chandrachud, who's one of the biggest votaries of fundamental rights. And I think the fundamental rights apply equally to everybody in this country, and sex is an absolutely private, personal issue. And if same-sex has been decriminalized, then I think marriage should also be allowed. Indian ethos, Indian culture, demolition of the social fabric and the cultural fabric of the society are all high-sounding words, or militation against the state ethos. This is all nonsense. They don't really, ring a good bell with the Supreme Court when it comes to these kind of things. And the Supreme Court is used to having these kind of arguments by the state. So it's not the first time that the state is going to put up this kind of an affidavit. I'm a little surprised as to why the state has opposed this. I guess they must be having their own reasons, but I believe that they'll have to make or tinker with a lot of other private, or rather should I say personal laws, codified, like Hindu Marriage Act, Parsi Marriage and Divorce Act, Special Marriage Act. But that's a legislative exercise which you will have to do should the Supreme Court come out with a judgment allowing same-sex marriages, which I think it will. So especially if it's the right to privacy, and you are infracting my right to privacy. If you tell me that yes, fine, you can be live-in partners, but you cannot get married. And why? Why not? Because I'm going to spoil the cultural ethos of this country. Is that the reason that the state is going to tell me? I'm sorry, the answer is absolutely nonsensical, especially when the live-in relationships have been kept to the level of marriage in terms of, your inheritance, your alimony, etc. Many things. So I believe this argument is not going to work. You will have to come out with much stronger arguments than that. And at the moment, I can't even think of any. At best, Article 14 should not be, although it allows equality, but I believe that same-sex should not be allowed. But then I don't even know. I'm just thinking on the top of my head. I can't even argue this out. I don't know what to argue. After 30 years of legal practice, I don't know how to argue this point out, saying that you can live together, but you can't get married. And why? Why not solemnize your relationship? In fact, not solemnizing and living in as may hamper the cultural ethos more, if at all I want to stretch that argument in the reverse manner.
Okay. All right. I think we are just waiting for Ashok also to join us in just a bit. And I just want to take this opportunity for the benefit of our viewers to read an excerpt from the particular affidavit, something that Swapnil mentioned. Also, now it says, while it is certainly true that all citizens have a right to association under Article 19, there is no concomitant right that such associations must necessarily be granted legal recognition by the state. Then it goes on to say, nor can the right to life and liberty under Article 21 be read to include within it any implicit approval of the same-sex marriage. So this, ladies and gentlemen, is the government really arguing the case on why basically you cannot legalize same-sex marriages. They are referring to Article 19, Article 21. But what it also says, and I'm again quoting for a part of the affidavit, it says family issues are far beyond mere recognition and registration of marriage between persons belonging to the same gender. Then it goes on to say living together as partners and having sexual relationship by the same-sex individuals, which you would recall is decriminalized now in the country, is not comparable with the Indian family unit concept. So this is what they say. They talk about an Indian family unit concept, to which many are questioning that, can culture not evolve? Can you not, expand the definition of this Indian family unit concept of a husband, a wife and children, which it says necessarily presupposes a wife and children, husband, which necessarily will mean biological man as a husband, a biological woman as a wife, and the children born out of the union between the two, who are reared by the biological man as the father and the biological woman as the mother. So I've just read out parts of the affidavit which are important, which have been accessed by Republic, which really tell you the premise that the government is citing to be able to oppose the case. But like I said, this is a case that, remember, is going to be heard in the Supreme Court tomorrow. I want to see if we can connect with Ashok now. We've been waiting to speak to him. He's a journalist, also an LGBTQ rights activist, who has been vociferously, remember, speaking about the rights of the community. And you would recall that, ladies and gentlemen, it's been a long fight for the LGBTQ community, after which you've seen, same-sex marriages that were, now the government is saying we can't legalize it, but, sex between individuals of the same sex has been decriminalized. But Before we get in, Ashok, I'm told we also have a response from Harish Iyer, who also holds some very strong views on the entire issue. Let's listen into what Harish has to say, and then we'll connect Swapnil with Ashok in a bit.
Republic TV has stood up with us when we had fought a fierce battle against Section 377, and I'm glad that Republic TV is with us when we are fighting our right to marry as well. Similar to Section 377, we had Section 377 which belonged to the dustbins of colonial history. It didn't belong in India. It was a colonial past that we got rid of, and the remnant of the same colonial past is the preferential marriage rights that we have. You prefer a certain, you prefer it only to the you afford it only to the heterosexual community and not to anyone else. I think time has come when that has to change. I know that the center has quoted marriage, quoted biological man, biological woman, biological male, biological female in its response. And I think India has always stood up for people who are different. Our constitution stands up for people who are different. And I don't think that we should be affording something only for a certain set of population.
So that is Harish, still very hopeful. I want to connect with Ashok, and apologies because we are not able to get Ashok live with us, but I thought it's important that he puts out his viewpoint, and we have him on the phone line. Ashok, thank you for speaking to us on Republic. How would you respond to this affidavit that has come in from the center? What really would you be hoping when the Supreme Court listens into the entire matter tomorrow?
Very quickly put, first of all, I think there hasn't been too much community mobilization and thinking about this subject, because Tushar Mehta, the prosecutor, had warned us when the Section 377 arguments were going on in the Supreme Court that the government is not at all for keeping 377 on the statute books. It wants it read down, so there is no issue on that. However, we will not entertain anything about same-sex marriage. And that was for a particular reason, because we would have got lost in all the personal codes that we have in this country. Like, for example, this petition is, they have gone to the Supreme Court asking for a change in the Hindu personal code. Now, does that mean two Muslim men will have to become Hindus to get married? I think there's been very little thought or leadership on this. It was extremely easy not to involve either the government or the executive or the Supreme Court in this issue. All that was necessary was to demand that the Special Marriages Act be made gender neutral. Once it's made gender neutral, and instead of a man or a woman, you say any two consenting Indian adults, or citizens have a right to get married, giving 1 month's notice or whatever. Then the government doesn't come in. Once it's a new gender neutral, all you do is you go in front of the judge and say that we too want to get married. Then any genders or the same sex, anybody can get married as long as they're adults. And if you want to put in a rider, you can put in a rider that you have a psychiatrist saying that they're mature enough to get married. That's it. You see, there was no community leadership, one. Secondly, I felt that people going under a particular personal code, their Hindu personal code, the Muslim and the Christians would never have accepted it, is wrong, because it communalizes the whole issue. Instead of that, you have a Special Marriages Act in this country where two citizens of this country who are adults can go and get married. You make it gender neutral because the Special Marriages Act says that you have to be a male or a female. And, then only you can get married. You make it gender neutral. Any two consenting Indian adults, and you don't involve the government. The government has got nothing to do with it. It's a civil the union. And this civil union, just as in France and all, they're called common law partnerships. It is valid. It is valid for the Rent Act. It's valid for passports. It's valid for so many things like your pension, for a joint account, it's valid. I just think there's been a very bad leadership, both on the side of the community as well as nobody seems to know what should be the strategy after Section 377 was read down. The instructions have been given to the government by the bench during that time that it is the job of the government to educate the people about LGBT and their issues. If you read the judgment, it's clear. So, it's a government job to tell us what the issues are. I'm pretty sure neither the Supreme Court nor the government knows the issues that we are facing. There is no sex education in schools. When I do the modules for sex education, you won't believe it, but when you talk about oral sex, they think it's kissing. They think it's kissing. Can you believe it? Now, if you don't have something as simple as sex education in schools, the amount of bullying going on, the amount of violence against transgender, effeminate children.
But, Ashok, you make a lot of important points, Ashok. You make a lot of important points, but I have to ask you this. This is the same government. This is the same government that decriminalized homosexuality. Now, to be able to say that, we cannot legalize same-sex marriages, how does this really work? And the government here, Ashok, is saying that same-sex marriage is not in conformity with societal morality and Indian ethos.
It just goes to show that the government prosecutors haven't read anything. Ruth Vanita's fantastic book on same-sex rights in India, it's a book of nearly 300 pages, which gives the whole history and background of same-sex marriages in India. You see, the person who's Tushar or whoever the prosecution is, they warned us because the number of personal codes in this country is mind-boggling. Under which personal code will it come? Please understand that I know I'm being not very popular in trying to, take this very so-called progressive side. The progressive side hasn't done their homework. The Special Marriages Act works in places like Goa, for example. I don't understand why, because if we are that progressive, you just change the separate Special Marriages Act and make it gender neutral. Then any two Indian citizens can go in front of a court and get married, whether it's male or female or male and transgender. For example, the Madras High Court accepts a marriage between transgender and a man or a male because it has got issues to do with inheritance laws. Okay. Now, if they are so progressive at that stage, why can't we play our little mobilization? There has been no mobilization of the community. The people have gone on their own as if, it's not a free-for-all. The government has to think of the majority which doesn't want it. If you tomorrow look, as far as constitutional morality goes, I would be very, very open about it and say that the government has no right to oppose it. Okay? Constitutional morality says any two people can go and in front of a judge and say that we want to get married. You get what I mean? I'm for it. But at least let us prepare for it.
Okay. All right. So Ashok still being very hopeful. Ashok, only for want of time, I'm intervening here. But we'll also try to get you live because that's very important. And tomorrow's a big day where the Supreme Court is going to be listening into that entire issue. And Ashok, we look forward to speaking to you again. I also thank Swapnil for having made us understand the nuances of the legal argument that have been made by the centre in its affidavit. Time for us to quickly head into a break right now. And on the other side, we are putting our focus on a lot more other stories that Republic is very, very closely tracking this evening. Days after going missing, the Pulwama widow is detained at their residence. You see her breaking down. She also alleges she was beaten up by the police while in detention.